Welcome everyone. Today we have Danielle Letourneau, the newly crowned women's Canadian champion. Danielle, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Danielle is officially world ranked 19. This is her highest rank ever. And for the last little while, she's actually been training in Egypt. So Danielle's from Western Canada. And how long has it been now, Danielle, that you've been in Egypt?
I guess it's been almost a year and a half.
A year and a half.
But with like the last 2 months, I spent some time in the States for tournaments.
Got it. So why don't you talk us through a little bit of the decision-making process? So grew up in Canada, families there, cultures there, Egypt, different part of the world, different culture, different everything. So tell us, like, people get stuck in decision-making. So I'd love to hear your thought process on that.
So I was at a point where I was plateauing a bit with my squash, and I felt like I needed a change, but I wasn't really set on Egypt or any place in particular. So I had spent a little bit of time training in England up at Sheffield with Nick Matthew, liked it. And then I went to go play World Championships in Cairo. And so I went there 10 days early. I like to get there early and adjust. And then originally I was going to go back to England, play 2 league matches, maybe try training there a little bit more, and then go to the Hong Kong Open. But I couldn't get my work visa to go and play in the league.
Okay.
And then, so I might as well stay in Egypt and train. So I stayed there for about a month, and then Hong Kong got canceled, so I stayed a little longer. And I just felt like it was a really good fit for me. I preferred it. Everyone's been very welcoming. There's good players. And so my original plan was to move back to Egypt in March 2020. And then just got a little delayed. And so once I was able to travel, I planned to make the move. So it was a little bit of a fluke that I kind of got set up in Egypt, but I always enjoyed it here and got a sense of how it was in like a little mini training stint.
Right. That's so interesting, because so at that point when things were not going according to plan, were you what was going on in your brain? So oftentimes people have plans, things don't go according to plan, and then we start stressing about it, right? It's like, oh man, I really needed to do this. I was supposed to get that visa. I was supposed to be here at this time. So what allowed you to just go with the flow? Is that a personality thing? Did you just, I truly believe everything happens for a reason. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I think in some circumstances I might get a little stressed out if things don't go to plan, but I'm pretty flexible, I would say. And I had support here, so that kind of helped encourage me. It's like, no, this will be good for you, and
Right.
it was. And I wasn't in a rush to go back to Calgary because I knew I needed a change, so I just kind of went with it.
Just went with it. I love it.
Yeah.
Open to change, going with the flow, and support. It sounds like those are kind of the key. And obviously having kind of a good structure in whatever it is that whatever decision you're making. You need some positive attributes, obviously, to kind of pull you in.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, I mean, obviously being in Egypt, after having trained in Canada, obviously for most of your life, having trained in the UK, as you mentioned, some in the US, and now in Egypt for a while, what is it about Egypt? Is there anything specifically that differentiates Egypt from other places now that you've kind of trained in many places? Or is it very much the same and it's just about kind of grinding it out no matter where you are?
So I'd say there's a couple of different things. One, there's so many good players, and everyone's on a pretty similar schedule. Like everyone does everything differently and might have their own little quirks, but generally in the morning you'll hit with your coach or do your fitness or solo and a drill session one-on-one.
Okay.
And then at night you play matches or condition games.
Got it.
So it's very individualistic, but everyone's on the same schedule. So for me to find a match, it's so easy. I have my choice of players, and it like changes each week. So you get used to different styles, and each of our practice matches, I'd say, are very competitive. Like we might be playing, there'll be a let call, and I'll look back at someone outside, and they'll give a call. So we're not just
Nice.
going, oh yeah, let like,
Right.
oh you can have it. No, you're fighting for the points even in practice matches. So I think it gives you a very good, mental edge because you're practicing to be competitive.
Right. Right.
And at the same time, I you don't really have those group sessions. You don't have group drilling sessions. So everything I'm working on in my training sessions, not necessarily match play, is very tailored to what I need to do and what I'm working on.
Interesting. So they don't have group training sessions. Is that for a reason? Is that just people don't want to do that? They just want the individual attention and then they just want match play? Is how's that kind of structured?
I'm not sure what the reason behind it is, but like if they have group training, they play games. And but I guess everyone, the mindset here is you're doing it on your own. You want to be the best. You're competing against everyone. So you're kind of doing your own thing. So that's my guess. But
yeah, that makes sense. And I guess because there are so many people and you guys have, you know, larger arenas or stadiums and stuff like that, you always have some form of spectators as well, I'm guessing, when you're playing your practice matches.
Sometimes some clubs more than others. Like if I go to the stadium, there's always going to be a few people around. If someone comes and plays me at Family Land, there's not going to be many people there. So it depends where you are.
Got it. Because that also helps with the competitive environment when you have some people watching. And like you said, you look back and it's like someone's giving you a lead call. So there's almost like a referee, even though they're not officially the referee. It all makes a difference.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
And like coaching in between games.
You're receiving coaching in between games as well.
Sometimes, yeah. If my coach is there to watch, he might give me some tips. But if I go and play a match on my own, then I could be playing without someone coaching me, but I could be playing someone who does have their coach there. So it's kind of trying to learn on your feet, but also gain that instant feedback.
Interesting. So I know a lot of juniors. That raises a question in my mind, because I know I coach a lot of juniors, obviously, and a lot of juniors get really set in their minds on, oh, I need a coach there. And if there isn't a coach there, and let's say someone else has a coach, they're already in like this super negative mental space. It's like, wow, no, I'm in trouble now. I don't have a coach. They have a coach, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you think about the idea of having to learn on your feet and having to kind of problem solve and figure things out yourself?
Well, I think it's really important. I think especially when you go and play professional tournaments before, and unless you're playing in your hometown, you're not going to have a coach. And most players probably won't have their coach. They might, before COVID, other players would coach each other and all that. But generally, you just have to rely on yourself. You know what you need to do. Coaches are more just to help give that feedback to move forward, not necessarily like when I'm playing a practice match. The coaching won't be necessarily, how do I beat this person who I'm playing?
Right.
Am I doing the things that I've been working on? So that's more what the coaching comes down to, at least for me. It's not necessarily like, okay, in this practice match, use this tactic and try it out. Like that's all just for tournaments. So I think by having the coaching be more focused on, are you implementing the things that you're working on? Then you're actually able to see it when you're playing, and you're able to understand, am I structuring the rallies the way I want to? Maybe am I shooting too early, or am I doing this or that? So I think if that's the sort of coaching, then it gives the awareness and players know how to think on their feet and have a better, court awareness. But if it's just tactical coaching, I don't think there's a whole lot of benefit until you get into a tournament. And that's if they understand the whole like the court anyways.
Right. Yeah. So tell us more about that. The court. What do you mean when you say understand the court?
Just like court awareness and where's my opponent? Like if you're talking from I'm so thinking more juniors, because you brought up your coaching juniors and stuff. Are they aware of, is their opponent getting tired and just standing at the back of the court and they're just hitting length? Maybe they could just hit a drop. Are they attacking too soon and their opponent's on it? So it's just kind of, if you're able to say in those practice matches to the kid who's shooting too soon, give them either a condition or say, wait until the person's absolutely buried and boasts out. That's when you've created the right opportunity, or when there's one really easy in the middle, then you shoot. But if it's just an okay shot, maybe it's not the right time. So when they go into a tournament, you can say, you need to be a bit more patient. What does that mean? It means to get them in the back before going short.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome. That's one of my favorite things that I like doing when we set up training is often wait till you force that boast out of the opponent and then take it short, because you're building your own mental toughness. You're building your own consistency and accuracy with your targets. And obviously you're not playing like that for the entire session, but that's at least a great way to start, because it's priming your brain to focus on fundamentals first and then choosing the right shot at the right time.
And if they're still resetting and getting it back, then it's like, okay, it's not good enough. Your length's not good enough. You have to, you notice when it's exposed that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And, you know, you talked a little bit about some of the decision-making on the fly. So is that a skill that you think you can train outside of just the practice matches? Or is that like, how do you train that skill of decision-making and raising awareness on court?
I think obviously on court play matches, but watching matches, not rewatching your own matches, as painful as it might be. Seeing really, sometimes I might even give myself a couple of days. Sometimes I'll watch my match right after I lose, or even after I win. But watching it without judgment, without being emotional about it, without getting caught up in your feelings, and just saying, okay, what are the patterns? What's this person doing? What am I doing? And so if you're able to watch and understand yourself, and also understand your opponent, see if you're going to play them again, okay, what do they do? But understanding, what do you do? Where are you getting caught? What are you doing well? And then going from there, it helps you kind of visualize it, see it. And then also watching like pro players. Like one of my favorite things to do sometimes if I'm a little nervous or I'm trying to think of what I want to do tactically, I'll watch matches of other people. Like my favorite person to watch was Renee. Because she has such a good mix. Yeah, she has such a good mix of everything.
Right.
And just kind of seeing, like, watch players that you admire. Like, what do they do?
Interesting.
How can I add that to my game?
Right. And then when you've watched your own video and you've realized that, hey, here's some patterns that I'm using that, you know, aren't that effective, or here's where I maybe, you know, opening up the court too soon when my opponent's not buried, etc. At that point, how are you then going and practicing that? Are you going and actually saying, okay, here's a deficit, and you write down, okay, here's something I need to fix. Here's something I need to fix. And then are you consciously then creating certain drills and condition games and stuff that you're like, I got to work on this. And then you just go and start practicing it? Or what are you doing at that point?
I think it's a mix of prioritizing what I have already been working on. And so, for example, if I'm working on just straight deep length.
Okay.
And I'm seeing it's getting all the way through the court, and then something else is exposed, then I'll go and maybe focus my attention on the next thing.
Got it.
But if my length still isn't quite there, my priority is still the things I've been working on, and we'll work on the new thing, but it won't be the main focus. It's like, okay, we'll keep building here because it's still not where it needs to be.
Right.
But we'll add movement drills, or we'll add drills that touch upon that area while working on this other thing. So
interesting. Okay, so still maintaining that strategic focus that you've had all along until it's up to the standard that you want it to be at, because you don't want to be like just sort of like chaotic and random. Like you have a focus, you have a structure for a reason, and just because there's another deficit that gets exposed, it doesn't mean that you suddenly just shift focus entirely. It's just something that gets added on the radar, and you start working on it gradually.
Yeah, and I think that's been probably the main difference in the last couple of years, because for a while I was jumping from thing to thing to thing, whereas, you know, I play one player, she'll expose one thing, I'll play another person, she exposes that, and I can't be, and I think I was jumping way too much.
Right.
So everything was just okay. Whereas now it's like, okay, let's make this really good, then build, then build, then build.
Right. And what do you think allowed you to do that? Because in the past, I've had a tendency when I was playing a lot more to obviously to jump from thing to thing as well. And I have certain thoughts around what may have allowed you to develop the confidence or the self-confidence to say, hey, I am going to just focus on this thing because it is the most important. What do you think has changed and allowed you to do that?
Well, I think, working with my new coach. So right now I have two coaches. I've been working with Kareem Ali Fathi for I guess over probably a year and a half now, like ever since I've been in Egypt since July.
Okay.
So I've been working with him, and he's very structured, and he sets the tone of what we're going to work on and how we're going to build.
Got it.
And so I pretty much show up. I understand what my focus is, but I just do it.
Got it.
And then, but now I'm at this point. So I also spent some time in Philly working with Mohammed Reda. So whenever I'm in the States, I'm working with him and keeping in touch while I'm away. And the nice thing is they both work very similarly. So what I'm doing now is like, okay, we have this base, and I'm working on certain things with Kareem, and then I'm working on certain things with Mohammed, but they're still connected. So they're not working on two completely different things in two different ways.
Right.
And so now, because I have these two perspectives, I'm able to see, okay, what clicks better with me. So they do things similarly,
right,
but not exactly the same.
Right.
So to hit a straight drive, do I want to do it this way or do I want to do it this way? Do I want to move to the ball this way? Do I want to move to the ball this way? And now I'm able to kind of create that identity and move and keep building like in one way that feels comfortable to me.
Got it.
So I think that's where I'm getting more of the say now in how I want to work and what I want to do because I have these two perspectives. But at the same time, if they want to work on one thing, that I'm going to do it and then discuss afterwards.
And that's also, it sounds like you do it because you've developed that trust and rapport with both Kareem and Mohammed to say that, hey guys, I trust what you're telling me and I trust your perspective and your opinion and your knowledge, and I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. So it's like once you trust, you do it, you fully understand what it is that they want.
Right.
And you get a feeling for it. Then there's more room to, adjust slightly. But
And how did you develop a bit of that trust and that rapport initially? Was it just kind of getting out and having conversations? Was it getting out and training together and then having conversations? Like how do you develop that?
Probably conversations first. And I was at the point where, my view is if you're stubborn and stuck in the way you're doing things, even if it's not working, then you're not going to improve. So I've always been pretty trusting with my coaches, even before coming here. It's like I'll do and try what you say, but for me to do it, I have to understand it. So it's not necessarily like I'm very trusting.
Right.
So, but the same working with a coach, and I don't fully understand what I'm supposed to do. Right. It's not that I'm not trusting; it's more that I don't fully understand the concept. But the way both of them explain things, they really break it down. So it's not just, okay, I want you to do this.
Right.
Why do I want you to do this?
Yes.
How does this make a difference?
Yes.
And then, so I'm trusting I do it, but then it's like, okay, I know why I want to do this. And then I'm aware of it in the game.
Absolutely. So it has to make sense. You have to understand the deeper reason and meaning behind it. And I think everything you're saying really points to the fact that the conversations are so critical. And I think things have changed so much from, let's say, 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it was like, all right, get on court and just do it. And people almost like didn't have a say. And they're like, oh crap, the coach is telling me this and I just have to do it. And if that means hit 1,000 drives, I have to hit 1,000 drives. Now I think there's that need for understanding, and it has to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, then the motivation and stuff just doesn't align with it, I think.
Yeah, and also the creativity. So someone can tell me go hit 1,000,000 straight drives, but what's the point of hitting the straight drives? Exactly. Eventually, I'll have to hit a drop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and actually, there's one interesting thing that I've been thinking about more and more recently than I ever have before, which is just the idea of generating creativity from kind of repetitive situations. So we were talking about straight drives. When you're younger, you're like, okay, you just have to hit the ball tight to the wall. And then as you evolve as a player, you realize, okay, the objective of the straight drive, if it's to get my opponent off the tee, there are many ways to hit that straight drive to achieve that. If the objective is to apply pressure to my opponent in the back of the court, there are many different ways, from technique of how to hit the ball to pace and angles and all sorts of stuff. And I think when we can bring that creativity into what might be like a boring drill, then it adds way more excitement into the work itself.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Like it's cool to start thinking at that level because it just makes it fun, even when it's normally boring.
Yeah.
Interesting. So actually, one question that did pop up in my mind earlier was, you mentioned your structure is usually some solo and coach based stuff in the morning, match play in the evening. How do you manage the overtraining idea? If you're going hard, you're playing top 20 players in matches several days a week. If I don't know, is that every day or several, like 5 days, or is it broken down?
It depends on the week.
Okay.
Sometimes I do overstretch myself.
Okay.
So this week, my original plan this week, because it's my first week back,
Right.
was to do squash on. I also took Saturday off because I was on vacation, but
Right.
I went squash Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
fitness Sunday for
Mm-hmm.
right after for an
Okay.
hour and a half. So that's like 2.5. Take a break, and then I was going to play, condition games just to
Okay.
ease it. I was going to play condition games probably 4 times this week.
Okay.
And then Sunday, Monday are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday would just be solo ghosting matches at night. You do get a bit tired like by Thursday. So normally my week goes Saturday to Thursday.
Right.
By Thursday, I'm pretty dead. I'll go get a massage. I'll really focus on my recovery, my food, sleep, everything like that.
Right.
It's more like a mental, like I've never had trouble staying motivated.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes when you go into a match, it's like, okay, I've done all this work. I've exhausted myself every week.
Right.
And obviously easing up towards a tournament. But then
Right.
then you put too much pressure on the performance or on the tournament because you've done all the work. You've probably trained harder than everyone.
Right.
But it didn't necessarily come together. So it's kind of being patient while also being exhausted, which means my emotions fly all like you definitely crack at points emotionally.
Okay.
And so I think cream's really good. So sometimes if I'm really, really tired, it's like, okay, we'll ease off. We'll make it a little easier. You're tired. But sometimes it's like I could be a little tired, but I can still push.
Right. Right.
Where the tough love comes in, it's like, no, keep going.
Right.
Keep going,
Right.
keep going. So then when I'm in a match
Mm-hmm.
and I'm getting a little tired, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exhausted. I'm a little tired. It's
Yeah.
like, no, keep going. You've been
Right.
told to keep pushing, you keep pushing.
Right. Right. So a couple of questions come up in my mind. One of them is the schedule you outline right now. You said I'm easing into it, and you're like four condition games this week, ghosting, fitness, solo, etc. It's like 4 or 5 hours a day almost from the sounds of it, right? Is obviously this is for people, you don't want to just jump into that. You got to work your way up to that over time.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to build up to that level of training, like that volume of training, that intensity of training? And is every session like super intense? Like if you're doing on court and then you're doing ghosting, are you then kicking your butt ghosting as well, or are you ghosting more for technique? And like, does that vary, for example?
It varies, and it depends how close I am to a tournament as well.
Yeah.
So I would say when I first got here,
Mm-hmm.
I was just doing squash sessions
Mm-hmm.
and maybe condition games a couple times at night. But the squash sessions were a lot more intense than what I was used to, and the heat and the food and all of that. So at first, I was just doing squash with cream, and then I would go to the gym a little bit and do my program that my trainer back in Calgary,
Yeah.
Richard, would give me programs.
Got it.
And so I would do those. We'd add a little bit of ghosting in, but just took it very slowly.
Yeah.
And then in August, like 1 month later, I got Samir on board, and he does all my movement stuff. So he comes, at the time he was coming 3 times a week.
Right.
So I had him, and then I noticed my fitness was starting to, I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I'm not going to go to the gym.
Right.
And so I was trying to still do it on my own, but the consistency of my gym work was kind of.
We lagged out for a second, but that's okay. So
Okay,
your consistency of gym work was slacking a little bit. You were still doing your matches at night. Okay.
So around April, so this is a few months later, then I started working with Dabo because I really needed someone to hold me accountable. And so I Dabo 3 times a week now, and I adjusted Samir to 2 times a week because it was just too much to do.
Right.
3 and 3.
Right.
Dabo sessions are very hard until maybe a couple of days before a tournament. Then he really eases up, gets me working fast. So most of the time it's really heavy. Kareem adjusts his schedule movement-wise on what we're focusing on.
Right.
So his won't be hard every single day, but they'll normally include some movement.
Right.
It really varies. I'd say generally it's pretty hard, but I started seeing a nutritionist here, and that helped because I had to adjust my food a lot to actually be able to do all this training. So first I was trying to eat the same way I did when I was in Calgary.
Right.
And I was just withering away. And so now that I've been working with Dr. Haney, he makes me eat a lot more, makes me eat the right things. It's pretty much just the same thing every day.
Okay.
And so that's kind of allowed me to up my training.
Interesting.
So now that my body's gotten used to it, I can come back and do it. But there's still days like I did my first fitness session on Sunday, and I was getting dizzy.
Wow.
Probably every 2 minutes. Like every time I had a mini break between exercises, I was getting really dizzy. And it's because I probably went in slightly too hard after taking a week off. So I think by the end of the week, I'll be more adjusted. So I do kind of just go straight in and then just go through hell for, a couple of days.
Well, that's interesting. So you definitely have this lead up period to a lot of intense training. There, you mentioned all the other factors. You have to have your nutrition, your hydration, your rest and recovery. All of those things need to really, really be focused. And without getting into details of like any nutrition stuff, because everyone's unique and everyone's different, was the biggest change, was it kind of like volume of food because you're training so much more and you're expending so much more energy? Was it making sure that you're getting like, I don't know if you're, like how comfortable you are with like eating a ton of carbs or whatever, because you need a lot of energy from carbs. Was it making sure you're getting enough carbs? Like what was sort of like a general theme?
I'd say volume and timing. So yeah, a lot more carbs. That's probably been the main focus, is adding a lot more carbs. And also, after I finish a session, having a banana right away, my recovery supplement, and being consistent about the timing of that. And so even when I go to a tournament, they give me specific things to eat at specific times.
Nice.
So he's very keyed in on the timing as well.
Very cool. That's awesome. And I mean, this is not to say anything against, like all of the intermittent fasting and keto and like all that kind of stuff. It just depends on everyone's needs, right? Like a lot of these things are booming so much and everyone's hearing about them and then people are trying them. But if you're an athlete and you're expending so much energy, you have to have carbs if you're expending energy at a higher intensity of training. If you were doing like long aerobic sort of stuff, then maybe you don't need as many carbs. But like squash is a high intensity sport, and obviously the people that are going to watch this are squash players. So if you are expending high energy, high intensity, you have to have carbs to fuel that energy. And then the timing part, that's the part that you probably need, like any of us would need guidance around that, because we don't know what the timing looks like. So that's where the nutritionist would really, really be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that helps is, so I have Whoop.
Oh, yes.
And so for me, like I'm not actually a very good sleeper. It's something I'm trying to work on, but I normally get like 6 hours a night.
Okay.
But it's a work in progress. But for me, sleep doesn't actually make the biggest difference on my recovery scores. It's food. Food's the biggest one, and it's always quantity. So I could even sometimes I'm not perfect with following the program. I try and follow it as best I can.
Right.
But it's not necessarily as much about what I eat. It's more about quantity for me, and timing.
Interesting. And you mentioned a really, really interesting, like a mindset piece there, which is you're not the best at following it, but that's totally fine, because there's no such thing as perfection. If we strive for perfection, then we end up just getting in our own heads. And you mentioned non-judgment earlier when you were talking about video analysis. So I think just being kinder to ourselves, knowing that we can't be perfect, but doing the best that we possibly can, and then incrementally trying to get better at that. I think that that's a great place for our heads to be at, like no matter what we're doing, squash players, parents, business people, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking on that, so before nationals,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of went fully off my nutrition, not fully, but generally went off my nutrition plan, went, I relaxed my training quite a bit. Like if people want to go out for dinner, I'd go out for dinner. If I wanted to have a glass of wine, I have a glass of wine. Like I didn't care.
Right.
Because I know you're going to ask me about later about that loss at US Open. So I think the thing is, so I've been training and following this program for a year, and
right.
I've improved. My squash has gone way better. There's no doubt about that. Like
right.
following it and doing things the way I've been doing it has been the right decision.
Right.
But I think mentally, because there's not a whole lot of escape when I'm training in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have my normal hobbies. I don't have, as big of a social life. Like you're just kind of confined.
Right.
I think mentally I cracked for sure. Like I wasn't even on court that day in that match. Like I think I hadn't even left my bed that day. Like I was just not
for the final.
Like I wasn't in any place to actually like mentally perform.
Oh.
And I think it's because I've been putting so much pressure on myself for so long. It's like, okay, I've been doing A, B, C, D, E. Like I've been doing everything right.
Right.
But to the point, am I actually enjoying myself? Am I having fun on court? Am I taking this too seriously? And the answer was yeah. I need to go out, not care for a couple weeks, and then just my whole plan for those 2 weeks was just to have fun on court. Still train with focus. When I was training with Mohammed, I was still taking in information, still trying to improve, but I wasn't putting pressure on any of the practice matches on being perfect at everything and just see how it goes. So I think for me, you want to have that consistency of, for months I've had that consistency, so I've actually been able to improve.
Right.
But also giving yourself a break. Like you can't be a robot like 24/7.
Right. And that's such a powerful thing that you've mentioned, because we play squash, as youth and all that. You start getting into squash because you love the game and you enjoy the game. And I've always had this thought, around professionalism. Professionalism is awesome because you improve. We're constantly raising the bar, but to what extent is that professionalism really, really valuable if people could potentially be miserable doing it? And if you kind of lose that love and that passion of everything that you're doing, it's such a fine line that we're constantly kind of walking. It's like a tightrope that you're walking, and you go a little bit over, and you're overtrained almost mentally, maybe physically, but mentally, if you're not doing enough, maybe you're enjoying it too much, but you're not improving as fast. So like, I guess, has this recent experience almost brought a new perspective to light? Is there a new focus in your own mind now around making sure that you balance the fun and enjoyment while still training with focus? Like what's your take on it now, given everything you just mentioned?
I guess two things. So I guess one, realizing, so at tournaments before I'd be professional, but still go out for a walk for coffee. You can go hang out with some players. You get a little bit of that socialization, like that gives you a bit of a break. But when you're in your hotel room alone for like like British, Manchester and British, it was like 3 weeks you're eating every meal alone in your hotel room.
Oh wow.
It it gets a bit old and lets your mind just kind of start thinking a bit too much about the results, about the squash. And so one of the main things I come away with is not caring about the rankings, the points and stuff like that, because I never used to pay attention to that. Obviously you want to reach your goal,
right?
But I never focused too heavily on it, and I think I started focusing way too much on the result. And so I'm still focusing on my squash, but I get to a match and I want that result so bad because I know what it means ranking wise. I know what the end result will be if I can win this match. And then I'm going in a lot, actually. I'm playing scared. I'm playing tense. I'm, you're not enjoying it. So now I'm really aware of each session. I'm still going in. I'm going to work hard, but my priority is to enjoy it. And when I'm off court, just finding a little bit more balance and not, letting my head get away from me too much.
And the piece you mentioned there about focusing so much on the points and the outcome, there's always this emphasis, this talk on focusing on process-based thinking versus outcome-based thinking, right? So how do you train yourself to, like, how are you bringing yourself back to process focus versus outcome? Obviously, you have to have an outcome. You have to set your goal up front to say, okay, this year my goal is to move from, this season from 19 to 12 or whatever your goal might be, top 10. I don't know. I'm just making numbers up. So that's your upfront goal. So how do you now stick to the process through every training session? And maybe even talk to us, if you can, about in matches, are there do you use cue words or affirmations for yourself to focus back on the process? Have you ever experimented with things like mindfulness or meditation and stuff like that to try to keep your mind in the present so you're not thinking so much about the outcome? I'd love to hear your thoughts about anything like that.
So I would say in general, what I'm practicing and what I'm playing, I'm still focused on the process. I'm very aware of what I'm doing. It's more an internal tenseness. My mind will still be thinking on, okay, what do I need to do in this game? But I think before the match, it's more the off-court stuff that I need to be more aware of.
Got it.
And so you come on and you might be tense, and I'm still trying to focus on what I'm doing and what I need to do. But when you're tense, your mind's not going to be flowing. You're using so much extra energy that, this is not going to, even if I'm still focused on, okay, get the ball to the back, something like that, you're still tense. So the things I really try and do is either simplify and just be like, watch the ball. Just watch the ball swing through, watch the ball swing through. Like, very, very simple.
And you're kind of saying this to yourself, repeating these things to yourself?
Yeah. Between points, I'll be like, okay, watch the ball. And then I'll remember for that rally, just watch the ball.
Yeah.
And that's if things aren't flowing, it's just like, okay, what is one thing I can do?
Right.
And then I've also, I guess this year, so I do work with a sports psychologist, and he's given me the tools. So I am, when I'm on court, I am aware of my thoughts, and I'm pretty good at monitoring it. I think my downfall is getting judgmental and having the emotions come into play, because I know I want it so bad. Then if I'm not doing I think I'm trying to do the things I want to do, and I'm focused on, I'm thinking the right way.
Yeah.
But if I don't do it, then I'm a bit too hard on myself. So that's something I'm working on. And I also work with Sky Brock Montgomery, and he does meditation with me.
Very cool.
And breathing exercises. And so he's helped a lot with, I guess, in my general life, just, breathing, being present, relaxing, but also in my warm up, I do a lot of breath work, visualization on the day. So for example, my match against Sherbini at the Pyramids this year.
Yes.
The year before, I played her in the exact same round, same court, and everything. So I played her 2 years ago, and I got destroyed. I was a bit demoralized after that match, because I had been improving, getting better, and you want to hope that you're kind of close, and then you go and get chopped. Okay, I'm not that close yet.
Right.
And so before that match, about maybe a couple hours before, I FaceTimed Brock and we did a meditation. It was visualizing the whole scenario, what to expect, what to go through. What's my worst fear? Okay, I could go out and get chopped again. And but because we had mentally prepared, when I went into that match, I was very calm. Like, I've been here before. I know what to expect.
Right.
I know what I want to do. And so that's helped a lot. And I've been working on it. I think I just need that consistency of doing it.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it's all about the mental consistency and something I need to keep working on.
That's awesome. So it's very, very interesting. So I noticed, in the game score, the first game was really close. It was like 12-10, I think. And then the second games went kind of progressively a bit, the score went down, but I'm assuming it was still like you felt good. Like, did you feel good throughout that entire match? Did you feel like you were still in the rallies? Did you maintain your level? Did she like step it up like crazy? What do you think happened in that match? Because you said you felt good about it.
I think a mix. So I think I got a little excited towards the end of the first because I had 2 game balls. I was up 10-8.
Right.
And then I hit 2 tens and I ended up losing the first game. So I think it would have helped if I had, been able to stay calm and maybe take that first game, just put her under a little bit more pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But with her, she's so good. She's so experienced that, once she has that confidence, she's going to kind of roll with it.
Right.
And also, so the way she plays, she holds the ball, like she holds every single ball.
Right.
So you don't know where it's going until it's going. So you're
right.
So for the first game, I was very good. I was like, okay, relax, watching, going. But, your legs get a little heavier. You're like just a split second too slow to the ball. So it adds up. The pressure adds up and then you get a little heavier.
Yeah. And then you get looser and sloppier and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like the quality, she'll play on that confidence and she'll just keep going.
Right.
And I think my confidence kind of dropped after losing that first game. And then she also just like put that work into my legs that,
right.
Yeah,
it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. The legs sort of hit this threshold. And then when they become that heavy and tight, it's hard to still be that spring. You can move around, but you can't be as explosive at that point. Right.
Yeah.
And then that starts getting into your own head. And you're like, oh crap, now my legs are heavy. Like, how am I going to do this? And then there's just like this mental chatter going on too.
Well, it's also just, you have a little bit of fatigue and then the mental fatigue. And then I caught myself in parts of the game where I was like, no, like go back to what was working.
Right.
But it just takes, with someone like Sherbini or Gohar, the top girls, it just takes that little mental slip
right.
to be out of it. Whereas, some other players, I could have a little bit of mental slip, but I can come back.
Right.
But
right.
They're going to keep their foot on the gas. So
yeah. So I know one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, what do you think separates you from, say, the top 10 or the top 5 girls? And from the sounds of it, one of them is definitely that they don't have as many mental slips, or if they have as many mental slips, they're very, very short. Whereas players that are slightly lower ranked will have more and potentially longer mental slips before they kind of catch themselves back. Does that sound right? And is there anything else that you think is there?
I mean, with the exception of, like, I'd say the top 4 right now are really, in a different level.
Yeah.
Like
in every way, do you think? Like pace, holds, accuracy, consistency?
But each one of them is very good at their style of play.
Yeah.
So I would say, though, that mental edge is going to be the number one thing that, differentiates everyone else.
Right.
Because obviously the rankings are based on a full year calendar.
Yep.
And so are you consistent throughout the year?
Right.
Because everyone can have one really good tournament. I think a lot of us on the given day
right.
could beat one another, but who can do it all the time?
Right.
Who can handle the pressure? Who will consistently hit their drops above the tin or not hit the tins at the bad point? So it's,
right.
I would say, because there's so many different styles, so you can't say it's just the holds. Like Sherbini,
yeah,
she can hold all day and she's the best at it.
Right.
No doubt.
Right.
But I wouldn't say like Hania's strength is probably her movement and her fight and her ability to rally.
Absolutely.
Everything like that. So, and you put those two against each other, you don't necessarily know how it's going to go.
Right. Right. Interesting. And I know you mentioned Hania, so I'm going to jump to that because I know you had told me that you have some practice matches with Hania, for example. So how do you go into a match like that and then extract maximum value out of it? Because I know when we become so familiar with certain things, like before you went to Egypt, I'm guessing, and this is just because this is how I would have thought, I'm guessing before you went to Egypt, you're like, oh man, this is awesome. Now I get to train with like world number 4 and world number 2 and world number 6 and stuff like that, which on a regular basis, which is something you did not have in Canada, for example. Yeah. So, there's this novelty to it at first. How do you still, and then because of that novelty, you're probably more excited. You're probably like, oh, I'm going to extract so much out of the session. Were you able, first of all, let's see if my assumption is correct. And number 2, were you able to sustain that sort of feeling? And how do you extract maximum value out of those kind of quality sessions?
Well, I think I try and go into every session the same way. Okay. It doesn't really matter who it is. Like I love training with Hania. Yeah. She's probably one of my favorite people to actually hit with. Nice. But I think part of that is we're both there to work on our own things. Yeah, so right. It doesn't matter who wins.
Right.
Obviously, it's nice. You come out with a win. You're like, okay, great. That's a bit of a compliment, but it doesn't actually matter.
Right.
It's more, am I still doing the things that I need to be doing for myself?
Yeah.
What are the small differences? Like, what does she do better than me? Mm-hmm. What can I take from that more? Just same with anyone, like any player.
Right.
This person's better at this. Like, how can I do that?
Right.
That's
right.
Cool. So I wouldn't say I'm out there being like, okay. It's 2 things. I think when you go against like those top players, it's either you're in awe and you, like I've had this before where like you don't want to like waste their time and you feel bad if you play well or things like that. But at the same time, you're there to still, and you get in awe of like how good they are. So it's more like you still need to work on what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the rest doesn't matter. Like I think the one eye-opening experience was in 2019 when I came for the 2 months, I hit with Renee.
Right.
And Kareem at the time was just trying to explain like a concept to me.
Okay.
And I didn't fully understand it. But then I went on court with Renee and she was doing it. So it was like, oh, now I understand what you're trying to get me to do. So then I can go do it.
Interesting.
So I'd say that was kind of one of the times where I was able to kind of see like, okay, this is what they're doing. This is how I can get, like, this is what I want to be doing.
Interesting. Yeah, I had a chance to hit. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't approach those games differently than anyone else.
Right. So. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a tendency when you're younger and all that stuff to kind of come in and just be in awe and be in shock and then just kind of just exactly what you said. And then as you mature a little bit and you become, maybe you spend a few years on tour by that point, then you say, okay, these guys are amazing. I'm going to learn from them, but I'm still going to focus on what I need to focus on and extract maximum value out of the session.
Yeah. So, but I do know there are other times when you do have younger players coming up and they're there to beat you.
Right.
They're not there.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, you can tell everyone you beat.
Yeah.
Whatever, right? But that's a one-day practice match, doesn't matter. And that's one of the things you playing with these top girls, practice matches, they don't mean anything.
Yeah.
And except for how you can be better.
Right. Exactly. That's a good approach for a lot of people listening, because there are some younger folks listening who have aspirations for PSA and stuff like that. And I think there's just such a big difference between a practice match and a tournament match, especially mostly from the mental side of things, that you can't equate the two. You can't compare the two. They're not the same. They're very different. Yeah, that's awesome. And
that being said, I will still get mad after losing a practice match. Like, I'm not, like, I don't care. I lose a practice match, I'll still be,
right,
a little upset.
Right.
But it's okay.
Yeah. But I think the emotions will be there, but you're still probably more focused on, did I achieve the objective of working on this thing that I was working on?
Yeah.
I would assume that you go back to that.
thing you're trying to work on and it's not going, and that's when you get mad.
Right, exactly.
One thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then I guess on the flip side of it, I was curious to hear your thoughts about tough losses. So I know, you played the US Open, I think it was September, and you made a first round exit. And that was I'm assuming that was not something that you anticipated or expected. So in those sorts of situations, can you talk us through how you process your emotions? How do you process the loss? How do you bounce back from that in a positive way and not lose any positive momentum you might have been creating leading up to the event?
So I would say normally, I'll give myself the night to kind of, maybe feel sorry for myself or feel angry or whatever. And then
Right.
next day it's like, okay, what went wrong? And just, you talk to your coaches, you figure it out. The one at US Open, it wasn't the squash. Like, and I know that. It was, more personal life, like emotional things going on. And so that one for me, it was just a write-off. That one,
Got it.
The lesson I learned from that was I need to have fun and enjoy myself because I'm not having fun. But otherwise, squash-wise, that one's just a write-off. That's not who I am as a player, and it's just one of those days. But generally, I'll take a bad loss. I'll watch the match, go over it, analyze it. What can I work on? Where was it getting caught?
Mm-hmm.
The same sort of thing. And then you just have to move on and just kind of look forward at the next one and keep building. But I'd say the last one, it was just you forget. And then the lesson was learned that it was more of a mental lesson than it was squash.
Got it. And that's huge, right? Because now moving forward for the rest of your career, you know that you need to balance that fun part of it, and you have to manage kind of some of the other mental life aspects of things in order to perform your best. And you can't just be a robot all the time, like you said.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, it had been coming for a while. Like, I wasn't happy at all with how I performed in both the tournaments in England. Like, not at all. And then got back to Egypt, and I had zero expectations going into the Egyptian Open because I was mentally not happy. I wasn't in a good place. It was just kind of like zero expectations. So I played really well.
Right.
But then I played well again. So you get excited and you're like, okay, I'm back. I'm feeling good again. And then San Francisco, Salma was just on fire, but it was another loss.
Yeah.
And you just kind of feel this like tension building, and then it exploded in my face at US Open. So I think I needed to learn that lesson a little quicker, or at least face how I was feeling more straight on instead of just trying to push through. No, it's fine. Because that's what I was doing instead of actually, because it's easy to recognize the errors when it's just the squash. But the mental thing is more like, okay, you actually have to deal with it head on. And I wasn't.
Yeah. And that's such a tough, especially when you're so deep into whatever it is that you're doing, like if you're so deep into squash is your day in, day out, hours a day. It's hard to kind of step back and look at things from that broader perspective. And I guess it took three events to realize for you that, hey, I need to make some changes over here to start enjoying it again. And and that's part of being human, right? Is we never learn just from other people's experiences, and then it usually takes us a few blows before we actually figure it out for ourselves. So that's interesting. Now, I think there was one other thing I thought I'd ask you about, and this is sort of like the journey. So how long have you been pro now?
I guess 6 years.
6 years, okay. So, and in 6 years, at first, did you notice any change in the journey? Like at first, were you improving pretty quickly? Did you hit a plateau, and then it's been like incremental gains ever since? Has that sort of been your experience?
A mix. So I came out and I did go up pretty quick, and I think I came out pretty confident. Did well in some 5Ks, 10Ks. And then once I got to I'd say around 45-ish to that area, I plateaued for a few years.
Right.
But then in the last year, so I guess since moving to Egypt, I went from 39 to 19.
In the last year and a half.
Yeah. I went from
Right.
39 to 19. So like that's been another, it's funny because I felt like it was very slow and I've been just wanting more and wanting more and wanting
Right.
more. It's actually very fast. If like I take a second to pause and look back, it's like, no, it's actually been a year and I've gone from 39 to 19. So
Right. So how did you, I guess, what I was hoping to kind of get across to folks is the fact that it's taken that many years. So it took 6 years to move from kind of where you started to 19. When you look at it that way, it's like 6 years is not that long, but there was a period of 3 years from based on what you said, where you kind of stagnated, you hit a plateau and you couldn't break through that plateau for 3 years. Like, I would just love to hear your thoughts around the need for motivation through times, patience through a journey where you want to try to become excellent or master something, and how do you improve like the efficiency of learning? Maybe if there's any thoughts on those things.
Well, I think one of the things is not to compare yourself to other people and other players, because there are some players who just jump up
Mm-hmm.
and they do well right from the start.
Right.
And then I think there's some players who they jump up and then they might plateau at, maybe closer to 20,
Right.
because then people figure them out. And then getting up that last little bit's it's hard.
Right.
But I think it's tough to you don't want to compare too much to what other people are doing and then doubt yourself
Right.
and what you're doing.
Right.
But also be able to see, okay, why are these people able to do that? What can I learn from them as well? So it's doing it without that judgment piece.
Mm-hmm.
And not being like, oh, this person did this, so it must be a good draw, or they just got this person on a bad day, or maybe they're just really good. Like, but you don't, and maybe I'm not good enough. Like it, you can
Right.
you could have all these negative conversations
Right.
going on, but at the end of the day, they're doing what they need to do.
Right.
And it's better just to like focus on like what you can do.
Right. So it sounds
And
like it's sort of belief in the process, kind of believing in your own process. And I know you mentioned earlier, kind of having that support structure in the team around you, that
yeah.
gives you a lot of confidence in kind of having the right folks around you as well.
Yeah. I think I trusted my process a bit. Like when I was plateauing a bit,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I maybe could have made a change sooner
Mm-hmm.
than I did.
Right.
I felt like I was improving, and I probably was in some ways,
Right.
but I was maybe a bit too patient with
Right.
it. And
Right.
then because I was too patient, there reached a point around when I was 40, like ranked around there, and
Right.
like, okay, maybe it's just not going to come. Maybe I'm not good enough, but maybe the way I should have done it was, okay, I've been here for long enough. I
Right.
need a change. And so once I made that change, it paid off. So I think it's like trusting the process, but also being critical of it after a certain amount of time.
Right. No worries. Did you get a sip of water? You've been talking a lot.
Yeah, well, that could be it. Like I started feeling a little run down after nationals,
Yes. It goes
but
back
not.
to our whole overtraining kind of awareness idea, right? Where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
that the mental side of it, there's the physical side of it, then the physical side starts manifesting like this.
yeah. It's only been like the last 2 days, so I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
hopefully get it under control.
No, the thing I was asking about was about like that imposter syndrome idea, and it sounds like you mentioned in the past where you had those sorts of feelings. Do I deserve to be here? Am I good enough? Maybe 40 is as far as I'm going to get, etc. How do you move? I know you. It sounds like you are past that because you mentioned that now I get on court and it doesn't matter if it's Hania, who's a top 5 player, or whomever it is. You're like, I'm here to work on myself. So you eventually move past it, but I don't know if you've reflected on this or if you have thoughts around it, because there are lots of people who feel that way, right? You go up, let's say you've never played professionally and you're playing in a league and you, as an adult now, and you play against an ex-pro. And in your mind, you're like, oh my God, this person's been a pro. Like, what do I do? How do I do it? Or you're a junior and you're coming up and you're playing a PSA event and you're playing the number 1 seed and you're like, oh my God, they're number 1. They've been playing PSA for 5 years, 7 years. This is my first tournament. Like, how do you gradually move past that?
Well, at least for me, I felt when I had those moments of maybe I'm not good enough, I know I'm stubborn enough where I'm like, no, I'm gonna show you. Like I'm
Okay.
going to teach you. Like it's like one of those things where, you know, or if I feel like people underestimate me and then I start to doubt it myself, it'll kind of, I'll try and turn it on
Okay.
as a motivation. Like even if there's no need to be angry at any other person, it's more
Right.
just like an extra motivation. No, I'll show you.
Right. Right.
So you don't think I'm good enough. I'm starting to think I'm not good enough. No, I'll show you I am.
Got
And
it.
so that's one way. It's funny when you brought that up though, because I feel like even in junior tournaments, a lot of kids will see, oh, I'm playing Egyptian.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, they're from Egypt. They're going to be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? They could be good, but not. It doesn't mean they're going to beat you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's another human being. And I think going into matches, just saying it's another person.
Right.
They're not superhuman,
Right.
or anything like that. And
Right. Right.
even just trying to say I'm going to go and do my best, even if I have doubts. Like
Right.
I have to trick myself. Like when I was playing Nour, I think
Right.
she's just freakishly good at squash. Like she's so
Right.
good.
Right.
But like no, I'm going to make it hard for her to beat me.
Right.
Or even if I don't win, which I mean, hopefully eventually one day I can.
Yes.
I'm going to make it hard for her. And each time I want to make it harder and harder and harder and do a little bit better.
Right.
So it's not necessarily like, okay, I'm going into a match and I'm worried about the result. It's okay, maybe I'm not quite there yet. And I do have those doubts.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm going to try as hard as I can.
Right. Right. And I think one thing that you touched upon, which is really cool, is it sounds like they're obviously, if you're competing against other people, there's obviously this element of comparing yourself to other people because you have to assess their game and your game, etc. But for the most part, it sounds like you're shifting your mindset to let me compete against myself to say, am I better than I was last time? Am I improving every time? And it's almost like this internal self battle versus this outwardly comparison battle against the other person, because you're not in this like fight for animosity against that person. You're trying to improve in here and with all of your squash specific stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely just like a personal battle.
Yeah.
Even if you're going in a match against someone else, you could even win or lose that match before you even got on court if you're having an internal battle.
Yeah. Like that I'm playing an Egyptian if they're a junior, because you have this thing in your mind that in Egypt, everyone is phenomenal at squash. And especially when you're living in Canada or America or whatever, and you haven't been exposed to that. Yeah, there are tons of really good players in Egypt, but from my understanding, there are also a lot of people that play squash relative to the number of people that play in Canada, for example. Yeah. So it's just a different environment, and there's no way to compare that. And then the other thing for a lot of people is that a lot of people can look like superstars in a warm-up, but the actual game is totally different. So let's not psych ourselves out in the warm-up because someone's ripping nicks all day. It doesn't mean they can do it in a game. Yeah, so, yeah, it's totally different.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Danielle, that was awesome. I really appreciate your time. I think this is probably a good point to call it a day. What do you think? Is there any last thing you want to say? How do you feel?
Oh, that sounds great. Thanks.
That's great. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hopefully we will see you achieving your goals for this season over the next little while. And I look forward to your next match against Nour to see how you incrementally get closer.
Hopefully.
All right, Danielle. Thanks a lot. We'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.